First, background. My husband's sister-in-law, and I don't get along. Basically, we're polar opposites. Also, she is a social justice warrior. Like, to the point that when I became pregnant with her nephew, she suggested I get an A so that I could experience the pride of having one. Also, she and her husband are fairly wealthy, and they live about 2 hours away from us. Story time. My husband had an untreated hernia that he lived with for almost 8 years, because he's a stubborn male and it wasn't hurting him. So when, a couple of weeks ago, that hernia sent him into unbearable pain, it was a shocker to us both. I drove him the 45 minutes to the ER. We live in a tiny town far away from civilization, and dropped him off. I didn't want to drag 3 sleepy kids into the ER at 10 p.m. An hour later he calls and says they're transferring him 2 hours away to the big hospital for an emergency surgery. That's where the surgeon was. I spoke briefly to the doc at the little hospital, who told me that if they waited for the surgeon to go to the little hospital, it would not be good. Because of my job and the kids, I couldn't go up to the big hospital. So I called sister-in-law because she lives near big hospital. She agreed to meet the ambulance and update me. So I waited, and waited, and waited, and received no update. The next morning, I still have heard nothing, so I text sister-in-law. Nothing. I'm at work at this time, freaking out. So I called the big hospital, explained the situation, and asked for an update. Nurse checks the computer and says hubby is still in surgery. I'm now really freaking out. Text sister-in-law again. Nothing. 2 hours later, I call the hospital and get this response. He's out of surgery, but we can't tell you any more than that because you're not listed as his emergency contact. I say, but I'm his wife, and I would like to know if my husband is breathing. I'm now crying. I'm sorry, ma'am, but until you're added to the list, I cannot say anything more. Yes, sister-in-law had put only herself down as emergency contact. At this point, I called my mom, sobbing. She told me it was probably a mistake and to call the hospital back to see if they could still page sister-in-law. So I do, and they did. I thought I'd get to talk to sister-in-law, but they just asked her if I could be added as a contact. She says yes, and lady transfers me to husband's nurse. Nurse tells me he's in recovery but still groggy. I ask questions about surgery, and she looks at his chart and says, the surgeon's note says he already updated the family. And I'm like, no. I said, well, I'm his wife, and until now, I haven't even known if he was alive. She sounds confused, but tells me the surgery lasted 5 hours and was more serious than they thought. In fact, they almost lost him twice. Cue me sobbing again. Fast forward 4 days. Hubby was still in hospital, but he had been keeping me updated. I finally got to go visit him with the kids. We get to hospital and sister-in-law had just gone for lunch. I didn't want to upset hubby, so I didn't tell him what happened. Then, sister-in-law comes back, gives me a fake smile, tells my daughter, age 4, that her pink dress is pretty, but that, you can wear pants in blue if you want to. Eye roll. Then, she proceeds to tell me that she has already decided that hubby was going to her house after being let go, and that he was going to stay there for 6 weeks so that she can take care of him, because I couldn't even be bothered to come visit him. I was shocked. Looked at hubby. He looked shocked. I was getting ready to speak when hubby says, I don't think so. I appreciate you being here, but I'm going home with my family. And she couldn't be here because of her job and the kids. Sister-in-law became angry at that and left. And I just noticed she's blocked me on all social media. That is absolutely unbelievable. What is her deal? A little Jocasta going on. I would put my sister-in-law on a permanent timeout if she kept me from getting updates on my husband. I'm a 34-year-old who's just becoming aware that his mother may be a no-mom. This discovery comes after decades of fumbling for an explanation for why my mom could never manage to be like normal moms. Acquiring this knowledge over the past 72 hours has been like getting hold of a skeleton key that continues to unlock a network of lingering life mysteries. Now that I finally have words to describe my experience, along with the invigorating courage that accompanies the dawning sense of validation you get when you better understand an elusive and bedeviling ailment, I'll try my best here to explain the dramatic moments leading up to this epiphany. My hope is this proves useful to others and perhaps increase my own awareness. I decided in December that I wanted to propose to my long-term girlfriend. At that time, I hadn't diagnosed my mom as a no-mom. But I knew if she was even remotely involved in our decision, that she would hijack the entire decision-making process, dictate every aspect of the ring selection according to her supposedly superior preferences, and punish me if I didn't comply with the dehumanizing role she's prescribed me throughout my life. That of a narcissistic extension of her will. Instead, I asked my girlfriend to go ring shopping. Since this step was akin to a kind of pre-engagement, we told our friends and families, who were thrilled that we were on track to getting engaged and married. My mother's reaction was twofold. She seemed genuinely happy for us, but she also immediately began trying to insert herself and control the engagement ring selection. She barraged us with websites and articles about the criteria for choosing a diamond, cut, clarity, carat, color, and constantly tried to pry into our thinking. She even invited us to lunch before our appointment at the jeweler. Though I hadn't labeled her a no-mom yet, I knew better than to accept her lunch offer, since it would mean exposing ourselves to her last-ditch effort to dictate the terms of our decision and its outcome. My girlfriend and I developed a budget, did some online research, and came up with a rough idea of what we, i.e., mostly my girlfriend, wanted. We made an appointment at a reputable jeweler, and with the expert's help, selected a diamond and setting to our liking. The total cost was just shy of $9,000, and I was told it would be ready to pick up in a week. Perhaps due to my hardwiring as an Acon, I noticed myself feeling guilty. I'd excluded my mother from a process that I knew she would have loved to have been more in the loop about, even though I knew doing so would have meant disempowering myself. So I settled on a compromise that I believed would strike a balance between retaining my autonomy and assuaging my guilt for having totally marginalized my mother from my life event. The day before my ring was ready, I invited my mom to join me when I went to pick it up from the jeweler. She was overjoyed by the invitation and heartily accepted. When the jeweler showed us, the ring I'd bought, my mother's disappointment was written all over her face. She began scrutinizing the accompanying certificates from the Gemological Institute of America that attested to the diamond quality, and started grilling the jeweler about various aspects of the diamond and the setting. As I was completing the transaction, my mother said in a kind of sing-songy voice that a child would use, but that underscored true disappointment, "You guys made the decision without me." Before we left the store, my mother's last act was to ask the jeweler to appraise my mother's own engagement ring in front of me, which I know for a fact my lobbyist stepfather paid at least $20,000 for. I am accustomed to my mother acting both childish and grandiose, so sadly, none of this behavior surprised me or bothered me in the least. I was focused on next steps of proposing to my girlfriend and beginning a family of my own. The next day, I noticed a missed call from my sister, followed by a text message from her that read in all caps, "Call me." She frantically explained that she'd just gotten off the phone with my mother, who'd told that there was a mistake with the ring, and that I need to call the jeweler immediately and correct their grave error. She explained that our mother had told her the jeweler had mistakenly placed the wrong diamond in the setting. It was wrong because the quality of the main diamond was not equal to the quality of the diamonds that surrounded. There was no possibility I'd agree to purchase a diamond in which the colors of the main diamond and the littler diamonds did not precisely match when exposed to certain lights at certain angles. I immediately understood what was happening. My mother was playing my sister and me off each other to sabotage my happiness because I'd excluded my mother from the process. As incredible as it sounds to people with normal parents, but probably not surprising to this group, my mother was punishing me because I'd made the most important purchasing decision of my life concerning the completely subjective and unique symbol my girlfriend and I had chosen to represent our love and lifelong commitment to each other in a manner that was not controlled by my mother, and therefore concluded with me buying an inferior product. In hindsight, I also believe she is envious that my girlfriend, now fiancé, and I genuinely love each other. And since my likely no-mom is incapable of true selfless love, and because I'm the family scapegoat, she targeted me for these negative projections about herself. Once my anger subsided, I told my mother via text message, "You are free to think the ring I bought for, redacted, is below your standard. And if you want to share your opinion with others, I can't stop you. But I just want you to know it hurts my feelings that you have done that." Her response over the next 24 hours was, again, in hindsight, highly predictable. A combination of self-justifying rationales and defensiveness. Then she deployed her husband, which I now understand to be her flying monkey, in Acon speak, to reinforce her self-justification and defensiveness, all of which took the form of what was done for the best intentions. I stood my ground, maintained my equanimity, and simply repeated that while I had no control over her opinion or whom she communicated it to, my feelings were hurt. She then followed up later that night with a long email, again explaining in minute detail why the $9,000 diamond ring I had bought was a piece of junk. But if I was happy with it, that's all that really matters. I replied via email, "Your judgment on diamonds may rival the experts, but your judgment in this situation was tactless and hurtful. Your opinion quite literally seeks to cheapen the unique and entirely subjective symbol my future wife and I have jointly chosen to represent our lifelong commitment to each other. You should not have made your opinion known to us, and I would appreciate if you would not raise this topic with redacted or me in the future. Predictably, she stonewalled me over the following week. Later, when I called to tell my mother the happy news that my girlfriend and I were engaged, my mother was monotone and devoid of emotion. Her tone of voice conveyed a sharp coldness bouldering on disdain. It was obvious to both my fiancé and me, listening over speakerphone, that she was not happy for us. In fact, it felt like she was trying to punish me. My mother quickly changed the subject. By the end of the call, my fiancé was in tears and I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Then I grew enraged. I texted the following: "Your reaction today was cold, and it was obvious to redacted, and me that you were not able to be authentically happy for me at the news of our engagement. Between this and telling me and others you think the ring I bought, redacted, is inferior, it's clear you want to make the focus on you and your feelings." I talked to trusted advisor about the ring thing, and he said your behavior is a reaction to insecurity. So on one hand, I'm trying to be sympathetic to the fact that something is missing deep inside you that would allow you to handle this like a normal person. On the other hand, I'm hurt and angry. I have never been so disappointed in you as a mother. Get over yourself and act like an adult for a change. After this, more predictable behavior ensued. Her husband texted me, trying to manipulate and shame me. After I calmly but firmly told him to mind his business, he told me to grow up. I responded, "Duck you." At this point, he began verbally attacking and emotionally assaulting me through an onslaught of text messages that continued until I simply stopped engaging. The following day, my mother sent a text which, in overly practical terms, described her happiness for us. For the next week, I went no contact with either of them. As if on cue, my mother broke the silence by emailing me to tell me she was altering her plans for my inheritance in a way that would destabilize my financial planning, and that if I had an issue with this, then I could discuss it with her. I saw this obvious, pathetic power play for what it was, and replied that it seemed inappropriate to discuss money, given the obvious rift in the relationship, which should try to be resolved before a discussion of money, a form of control for her, entered the conversation. After a few days, to her credit, she told me she decided to see her longtime therapist because she didn't want our ongoing dispute to cast a shadow over what was supposed to be a happy time for my fiancé and me. A few days later, my mother agreed to meet, so we met yesterday for coffee. To prepare for that meeting, I did probably 15 hours of research, eventually stumbling onto an article about what life is like under a narcissistic parent. Since then, I've re-examined much of my life through the lens of an icon. I have been making a series of virtually continuous, rapid-fire connections that explain my family dynamics in which I was raised, as well as my current circumstances. I then spent roughly 8 hours figuring out which of this information I wanted to convey to my mother and how to best do it. I decided to make a chart that featured a column A and a column B. Column A contained a list of beliefs and behaviors of someone with narcissistic personality disorder, which I listed and defined in practical terms on the chart. I filled column B with the beliefs and behaviors of a normal person. Nowhere on the chart did I explicitly use the word narcissism. My mother began our meeting by giving me what I interpreted as a sincere apology. Then I showed her the chart, asked her to study it, and asked, "Do you see any of yourself in column A?" She conceded that yes, she did. I then walked through the facts of the previous several weeks, analyzing them under two contrasting approaches, but again, without explicitly using the term narcissism. She genuinely seemed to cop to the traits of someone with NPD and began crying. So one of my burning questions is this: does the fact that my mother acknowledged her narcissistic traits mean that it's not so severe, that if she continues to seek help, which she vowed to do, she might one day be able to keep it in check? Or is the fact that she so quickly matches the diagnosis mean that she really does possess narcissism to the extent that she will never be able to relate to me as a normal, loving parent who sees their child as an individual person deserving of selfless love? At the end of our coffee, my mother asked if my fiancé and I have made wedding plans. I reflexively said no, although strictly speaking, this is not entirely true. I paused for a moment, then decided to lay down a marker for what I consider an unhealthy and healthy relationship to look like, and left her with a choice. I wish I could give you an honest answer to your question about our wedding plans. I said, but I don't trust that I could tell you that information without you going into column A behavior. I'm at a stage in life where I'm starting my own family, I continued, and two of my highest values that I hope to practice in my family are health, not just physical health, but emotional health and dignity. The concept that people are deserving of respect and have worth as a person. While I would like to be able to have a relationship with you, column A is unhealthy and incompatible with my dignity, I said. So this is a kind of situation where forgiveness will have to happen over time, if it happens. I'm still angry and hurt, and I'm going to leave now. Let's see how things evolve over time. Thank you for meeting with me. I accept your apology, and I love you. Congratulations on your engagement. There is no world in which a $9,000 ring is not sufficient. Your mom is bat-crap crazy. Your mom went for number 3 in the abuse cycle with the therapist. It's just a means of control. If she is truly a narcissistic parent, which sounds like she is, don't plan for the inheritance. Narcissists will use money to try to control you. Getting out from under their control is the only way to really forge your life path and begin the healing process. Your closing statement to her was bang on. Whatever you do, do not involve her with the wedding planning. If she went this insane over the ring, she'll go absolutely nuclear with wedding planning. If you can, have a wedding you can pay for yourself. It's the only way to fly with narcissists.